It's quite a challenge coming at the end of such an inspiring and interesting day. Let's see if I can work this. David Sweeney made the point this morning that we should evaluate research not based on where or which journal it's published in, but rather the research itself and what actually is published. I was thinking about that about 3 months ago when I started my new position at Clarivate, and I was reminded of the importance of this, the importance of confirmatory results, and that we should do more to reward long-term progress and not just short-term headlines. Even if that work isn't surprising in themselves, but confirms important discoveries of the future. The best research stands the test of time. And since we're in Berlin, I thought it would be appropriate to kick off with this story. In 1905, Albert Einstein published 4 papers that transformed our understanding of light, atoms, space, time, and energy, and the world took no notice. 10 years later, still unknown outside a very small academic circle, Einstein published his masterpiece on gravity, and again, the world paid no attention. At the beginning of 1919, he was still unknown to the world at large. Things, however, were about to change, thanks to a story of one of the most famous confirmatory results research papers of all time. In March 1919, 2 scientific expeditions left Britain. One was bound for Sobral, Brazil, and the other headed to the African island of Principe. Their objective was to use the total solar eclipse on May 29th to test Einstein's general theory of relativity. The eclipsed sun would be in front of the bright Hyades star cluster, offering an ideal opportunity to determine if, as Einstein predicted, starlight is bent by the sun's gravity. Both expeditions were a success, and the results were presented in London on November 6th. Even though many physicists admitted being unable to follow the mathematical complexities of Einstein's work, his daunting equations had transformed into an instantly understandable 2-word story: starlight bends. The press loved it. Lights all askew in the heavens ran a headline in the New York Times. And the rest is history. Einstein awoke here in Berlin on the morning of November 7th, 1919, to find himself world famous. And with that, I wanted to begin by thanking the organizers, Arno and especially Anke, who was very persistent in contacting me, to inviting me to this wonderful event. It's an event I've always wanted to come to, and in the many years that I was at Nature and at Macmillan, somehow never made it. And I was kind of reminded of the people that don't make it to this event, and also the talking past each other comment from early this morning. And it struck me in the last session, which I found fascinating, by the way, that it's kind of ironic that ResearchGate is here in Berlin, and somehow they're not at this meeting. There's so many faces and colleagues, though, former and new, all here in one place. Publishing for me throughout my career has always been about responsibility. Publishers are involved in creating great publications, working with some of the most brilliant minds on the planet, the leaders in their fields, whether specialists or broad. Publishers are trusted with the work of researchers, and trust is hugely important. They're invited to participate in the creation and expected to deliver the best, most reliable, widest possible dissemination of a new work. And with all of that comes responsibility. The work that publishers do to deliver the service to researchers and educators across the globe is a synonymous part of the research and education cycle, where companies work closely and predominantly in step with the public sector, although not always, as we heard today, creating meaningful jobs in the private sector to deliver real value in both global and national economies. At its best, this collaboration delivers critical support of scholarly inquiry and technological innovation, and most importantly, it contributes to the intellectual and cultural development of human society. It's a huge responsibility and something that should allow all of us to take genuine pride in what we do and the impact in the world. Research begets new knowledge. Only by combining the thinking of multiple experts, building on existing research, making connections, and forming collaborations, are medicines and technologies we enjoy in the modern world possible. This enhancement and this enrichment in our lives, in both material and intellectual, has become the foundation of the pace of discovery and change, which is today the slowest it will ever be when we look to the future. And against this industrious, pioneering, exciting backdrop, schools, colleges, universities work relentlessly to educate the next generation, to perpetuate and reinforce this cycle, and to empower researchers and leaders of tomorrow to harness the learnings of the past. This process of research, development, and education has been going on for many hundreds of years, but it would be complacent to believe that it's inevitable. The creativity, imagination, courage, hard work, dedication, resilience of researchers, technologists, educators, and those that support them is really staggering. Academic journals, the peer review process, and citation analysis, to pick three obvious examples, did not spring from nowhere fully formed. They were dreamt up, conceived, and turned into reality by those with the foresight and the courage to imagine a global research community, global distribution through publishers and technological platforms that help cross borders, bring together the brightest minds of the world. The thriving businesses that we all run today are testament to those pioneers that came before us. But before we all get a bit too comfortable patting ourselves on the back in this really inspiring room, I would want to draw your attention to the profound challenges that we face in 2018. And we were just talking about some of them in the last session. What I find really encouraging for me about this gathering is that it's so different to the first STM meeting that I ever went to, which was nearly 25 years ago. I could barely recognize the group of people whom I found myself with, because as an academic editor at Nature, it felt so far and distant from what I was interested in. Those meetings were about library budgets. They were about copyright, which is still a topic that obviously we're involved with. They were about the fear of technological change. Mostly what I took away from those early days in STM was the fear. And what I'm really encouraged about today is that it's not about fear. We do have challenges, but I think we're starting to understand what our most important challenges are as we work towards a horizon that will take us beyond where our forebears could imagine. The challenges that I want to explore with you a little bit today, and the challenges that I'm thinking about now, just in my first few weeks at Clarivate, are the challenges that are faced by the total research enterprise, deep in the heart of universities, colleges, and schools and institutions, which form the backbone of our society, past, present, and future. I wanted to start with universities. Over the last 70 or more years, universities have enjoyed unprecedented growth. They've risen in number from 500 worldwide just after the Second World War to more than 10,000 today. Student numbers have increased similarly. In the UK alone, nearly half of all students now go into higher education, a roughly tenfold rise since the 1960s. Around 70% of US high school students go on to college. In the rich world, university enrollment has become a rite of passage. But while they should be basking in the glow of this remarkable success, many universities instead feel something of a sense of crisis, which is brought on by three big fundamental questions: who, how, and what. Who should universities be for? Should every student aspire to attend a university? Or would eliminating all elitism from higher education miss the point? And how should the privilege be funded? Should the current students pay, as is now the case in the US, in the UK, their parents, current taxpayers, future taxpayers, past and present benefactors, or some combination of these? Above all, what are universities for? One of the other roles that I have when I'm not at Clarivate at the moment is that I'm a trustee at Yale University. And this is something that even a well-endowed university like Yale, we grapple a lot with. What are universities for? Are they for conducting taxpayer-funded research? Are they for training the next generation of professors, teaching employable skills, supplying medical care, providing infrastructure for the humanities and arts, fielding sports teams, acting as landlords and custodians of vast real estate empires? Which, if any, of these roles would be better left for others to do? None of these questions speak, in the first glance, to the information industry in which we work. But the fact is, our most important customers and collaborators are facing these challenges, so they become our challenges too. Maybe not in a tangible sense today, but these are the challenges and questions that will define the marketplaces that we serve in the future. Those of us working alongside the research and academic communities ought to be able to strongly identify with the fact that universities, like some of us, are seeking to perpetuate a long run of success in an uncertain and rapidly changing world. They face the challenge of sustaining relevance in the now against a colossal heritage and in the anticipation of a demanding future, reassessing the essence of their value to society and their place in societal development in the presence of democratic social web, where services provided by learning institutions are in some part replicated by alternative and new players. Universities are questioning which role they will play 10, 20, 50 years from now. Can they secure their place in the future? And what of their perceived strengths will be core to this, and which will become irrelevant or perhaps even detrimental to achieving a place in tomorrow, not just in the history books? Many of these questions will undoubtedly feel familiar to this room full of leaders. The second fundamental topic that I've been considering and reflecting on is the researcher credibility crisis. It's not just the institutions themselves that are being challenged to redefine or reconfirm their position in society, but also the role of the researcher itself has been taken under the microscope and analyzed publicly in recent years. The questions left unanswered and in the debate include, how should researchers respond to political hostility? And by that I mean, what can be done to restore the societal standing of experts? We become an anti-expert society. How can research inform politics without descending into partisanship? And how can research funding avoid becoming a victim of political infighting? Another area that I focus on is, how should researchers serve the economy or human culture? What is the true purpose of research? And we need to know this if we want to actually measure its impact. How can society measure and maximize the desired outcomes? How can one demonstrate and communicate its benefits? And finally, why is research so difficult to reproduce? What more can be done to reduce or negate individual researchers' biases? How can we reward truly robust research? How do we measure robust research? And what incentives can be provided for uncovering invalid findings? Again, we see these big fundamental questions, and I'm sure everyone in this room has a role to play, particularly in the last. Why is so much research impossible to reproduce? The popular image of reporting research through academic publishing has been a process that transcends individual human foibles by providing a series of checks and balances through processes like peer review, editorial selection, grant funding decisions, tenure committees, and so on. Processes that reward convincing novel findings in the researchers that produce them. And to a large extent, this is true. Witness the long track record of progress I just spoke about. But as research becomes increasingly global, increasingly networked, it is also becoming increasingly clear that important aspects of this system are not fit for purpose, or in the worst cases, broken. A system that all of us in this room are active guardians in and participate in. The psychologist Brian Nosek, among others, has shown that researchers routinely fall prey to cognitive biases. Rather than reasoning based on the data, they rationalize their pre-existing beliefs by selective interpretation of the data. If you believe Karl Popper, scientists are supposed to spend their days trying to prove their pet theories wrong. And the more they fail in this endeavor, the stronger their theories become. But in practice, this rarely happens. In this sense, this simply means that researchers are no different to anyone else. Surely it's the scientific research process itself that helps us to overcome these foibles. But on the contrary, increasingly researchers themselves are highlighting ways that the current system exacerbates them. John Ioannidis' famous, and some would say infamous paper, Why Most Published Research Findings Are False, showed that, at least in biomedical research, using current approaches and statistical thresholds for significance, we should expect most research findings to be wrong. Not some, or even many, but most. And this isn't unique to biomedicine or even natural sciences. In more recent work, Ioannidis and his colleagues have reported comparable problems in empirical economics, and there is no reason to think that the problem stops there. This really scares me, and if it doesn't scare you, then I probably haven't explained it well enough. When we talk about the system, then we become inevitably to all of us, because our industries played a formidable role in the impressive and successful history of industrialization and modern world development. But then we're also called to the bar to take responsibility as we cross-examine the current state of affairs. The role that those of us in the broader research ecosystem decide to play or not to play in supporting the research and academic community and finding answers to these questions is the fundamental question that we collectively should be examining at a gathering of this caliber. The publishing and information specialist community must actively address questions such as, why publish so much that is read by so few? The ever-increasing rates at which papers are published aren't just a sign of higher rates of discovery. They also reflect the fact that researchers and our industry alike have become hooked on a publish or perish model that values quantity over quality. The impulse to share is good, as we just discussed, and it's even central to science. But the main incentive is to publish in order to satisfy funder requirements and to extend one's own bibliography, rather than to genuinely contribute to the pool of human knowledge. Thus, we get salami slicing, as I used to call it at Nature, of research into minimum publishable units and vast numbers of papers that are referenced and perhaps even read by literally no one. If you publish information that no one ever reads, is that information actually knowledge? Of course, distinguishing between seminal and inconsequential work was the central problem that citation analysis was invented to solve, and it will remain a vital method to achieve this. But we can and should go further. And whilst it's early days for me at Clarivate, certainly that's very much on my mind. Why only publish positive results? In a way, this is the opposite of the problem we were just talking about. Though a lot is published, this in itself, in some respects, is too selective. By publishing only positive or surprising results, publishers contribute to publication bias, which is one of the key reasons that the system as a whole embraces so many flawed results. To provide a really simple example, if a given experiment has a 1 in 100 chance of giving a wrong, though interesting and surprising result, and 100 labs try it, then surely the one lab with the surprising but wrong result shouldn't be the only one to publish. We're currently putting too big an emphasis on surprise and novelty when we should be rewarding other less sexy but equally important attributes of good research. I'll describe in a moment what some of these are. So how can we be part of the solution rather than pander to the problem? And that's a key question for all of us in this room. The research enterprise has proved a monumentally successful human creation, and we can take a small amount of credit for that. But in certain important ways, it's also broken. The system is and must evolve, and our role in its evolution can be inhibitive or contributing. This is in our hands. So where does research go next? No one organization, let alone any individual, has all the answers. So what I'm about to describe isn't by any means a comprehensive solution. But I'm going to try to provide some pointers, some ideas, some ways of thinking, and the ways of thinking that I'm bringing to the enterprise that is now Clarivate. I hope that this can help us move collectively in the right decision and allow those of us working alongside the academic, research, and scholarly community to find our true purpose in enabling excellence going forward. Enabling excellence in a way that maximizes the impact that research has on society at large, and not just maximizes the impact factor. The first thing to recognize is that things have changed and scientific communication is changing. We've talked about new tools and new approaches that are being explored by new players, publishers small and large. In the last 10 years, perhaps the most significant trend among academic publishing has been the increase in consolidation and opportunities of scale. But this is no answer to the challenges described. Arguably, it compounds some of the challenges, as what we need most of all is not size and conformity, but we need talent. What we need is diversity of thinking and creative approaches which are not always comfortable partners with a unified corporate view. Ours is an industry built on the vision and daring of people like Eugene Garfield. He and his colleagues brought order to a chaotic world of research information. Now we need to rise to a similar challenge. Cynics might say that today's big innovation opportunities lie in different realms, especially in technology. I hear many publishers say, we're not a publishing company anymore, we're a technology company. And that we shouldn't have such high expectations for our own industry. I disagree. The domain in which we operate is still full of opportunities and good ideas, if you know where to look. These can drive progress for many decades to come. We just need to have the insight and to recognize them and the courage to act. To see this, look at Google. The central idea on which Google was founded, the Pagerank Algorithm, was inspired by, of all things, citations. Larry Page noticed that a large number of inbound web links, especially from other documents that themselves, highly linked, constitute something like a collective vote in favor of a particular document. In many ways, this insight was Eugene Garfield's idea transplanted to the web writ large. We need to engage in similarly creative thinking. It was a pretty good idea, to say the least, and it was inspired by, of all things, academic bibliometrics. Our industry is sometimes likened to a glass of water. If you compare the academic information industry with other more challenged areas of publishing, trade books, newspapers, consumer magazines, then you might see our glass is half full. Wouldn't they love to have our business models? If, on the other hand, you compare it to the technology industry, much of which seems to challenge us in one way or another, then you might think of it as half empty. But neither of these views is useful. Instead, we need people who see old things in new ways, just like Larry Page did with citations and web links. Truly imaginative people who look at the picture and don't say, the glass is half empty, or even it's half full. Instead, they say something like, this glass is too big, or it's the wrong shape, or maybe I will put something besides water in my glass. In some ways, our businesses are the wrong shape, at least if they are to support the ways that discoveries will be made and communicated in the future. We know this system will be different from today's because it has always evolved, and because there are too many problems with the current one for it to remain unchanged. Our past has been a glorious one, but now we have new tools and technologies, and we must use them. We must be inspired by pioneers like Garfield, but we cannot be content to simply rest on their laurels. We aspire not to follow in their footsteps, but to blaze new trails, just as they did. And as well as taking inspiration from the inventiveness of big tech, let's also adopt some of their current paranoia too. Just as companies like Google and Facebook have found that their well-intentioned and undeniably useful services can have unintended effects on the communities they serve, so we find ourselves in a situation where research is being held back by perverse incentives, some of which are our own doing. In our case, democracy and society are not at stake, but knowledge and culture are, which makes our challenge no less important than theirs. So with this background, surely we can choose to take responsibility and do something about it. But what? As I said, I don't have all the answers, but here are some pointers and some indication of the direction of travel that we will go in at Clarivate as well. Research is about more than peer-reviewed papers. We need to recognize that journal papers are not one, that journal papers are just one of a wide range of means by which researchers collaborate with each other and communicate with society at large. They also use preprints, posters, presentations, commentaries, data sets, software, and algorithms. They might also contribute to news articles, broadcasts, policy papers, and patents. Even these don't take into account other roles that researchers might fulfill as reviewers of papers or grants. Journal editors, political or commercial advisors, public communicators, and of course, as mentors and educators. When assessing a researcher's contribution, it is becoming less and less credible to focus solely on their publications in academic journals, central though these often are. It has to be an imperative to develop channels and tools to surface and recognize these activities and the value they add. At Clarivate, our desire to promote previously unsung roles in research and recognize the breadth of the process was one of the reasons behind our acquisition last year of Publons, a young company that, among other things, enables researchers to gain credit for carrying out peer review and helps publishers guard against fraudulent peer review and fake science. We plan to do more in this direction. In addition, there's a huge separate publishing domain of research databases, covering everything from molecules and genomes to stars and galaxies. These databases take huge effort to build, but can deliver incredible value, not least because when they're accessible by other computers as well as people, the potential is limitless. But the researchers and organizations that create them rarely gain credit without publishing a paper. This is surely wrong. Such databases will only grow in size and importance, not least because they would probably be a more useful destination for much of the information that currently appears in unread research papers. We need to ensure that the reward structures reflect this reality and that some of the most intensive and valuable labor receives no clear recognition in today's environment. The links between papers represented by citations are crucially important, but they're not the only things that matter. When we look at scientific papers, papers also refer to protocols, algorithms, samples, research products, equipment, data sets, grants, patents, institutions, and even countries. They also sometimes have attributes that reduce publication bias and other distortions or increase transparencies. These might include pre-registered experiments, negative or confirmatory results, accompanying open lab notebooks, and so on. If such approaches can be rewarded, then their use must be collated and measured, linking to sources and multidimensional citations, though far from easy, at least are made feasible by new digital approaches in a way that have never been in the past. Publishers, information and data specialists, including Clarivate, can do a much better job to document the different kinds of relationships that exist between papers. Some papers build on previous work, others negate it. Some citations point to general background information, others to specific protocols or reagents. Some wish to convey their debt to previous work, and others, let's be honest, do so merely in an attempt to game the system. The fact of a link between papers is interesting, but the type of link is important too. And as I highlighted at the beginning of my talk, we must do more to reward long-term progress, not short-term headlines. Though it may sound foreign and unnerving, this may even mean rewarding retractions, at least when they're made in an honest, open, and timely way, and when the original flaws were honest mistakes. There must be no incentives for keeping scientific errors secret. Taking together, this implies a much wider range of metrics than we've been used to in the past. If so, that's for the good. Yes, it might get confusing at times, but a wider choice also means a better chance at having just the right metric to hand when you want to make a decision and reduce the chance of an inappropriate metric will be misused. A wide range of measures also reduces the incentives to try and game any individual number. I'd like to add 3 further comments. First, we in this room are no exceptions to the general rule that openness and transparency is a good thing. We need to reach our editorial decisions and calculate our various metrics in open and honest ways that instill trust, and there's always room for improvement. Second, we must continue to exercise human editorial judgment to help separate the wheat from the chaff. This is a key part of our role and won't be replaced by data or algorithms, even if they're increasingly used to support it. Our intelligence is not artificial. I attended one of the large publishers' board meetings just a few weeks ago, and a debate ensued, and I was asked, in a challenging but friendly way, why do you have to select journals anyway? You could index everything at Clarivate. To which my reply was, why do you have to select papers anyway? You could just publish everything. Why do you do peer review? At Clarivate, curation and selection will remain an important part of the service that we provide. It will change going forward. It will become more open, more transparent. It will become more about relevancy, but you will see a change in that, and you'll start to see that change relatively soon. Third, I would say that none of these things are achieved overnight, because nothing worthwhile ever is. It was nearly 7 years ago that we created digital science. It takes a long time to incubate and develop and execute on a great idea. Helping to change the way that research is carried out, communicated, and assessed is a major undertaking, and will no doubt suffer its fair share of setbacks. But the importance of our goal will more than justify the effort. Planning and acting for the long term, and creating the stepping stones in terms of products and business models to take researchers from today to tomorrow is not only sensible, it's also essential. And so at Clarivate, you can also expect to see more smaller acquisitions, but you can expect to see stepping stones and gradual changes to what we do and what we offer, as well as the transformational ones. But together, these three things, transparency, sound judgment, and perseverance, will help us to achieve our aim, which is ultimately to foster a better, more prosperous, and more knowledgeable world. We often think of challenges as representing bad luck, but on the contrary, it's our immense good fortune to be able to embrace one as worthwhile as this. I've sketched out what I see as our past successes as an industry and our current challenges, and some ideas for how we can rise to them. In sharing these thoughts, I realize that we are not all in the same position. For a start, some of you are journal publishers, and some of you are involved in research funding, and others are librarians, while Clarivate does none of these. But that diversity is one of our greatest strengths. To be independent in this ecosystem is a great strength. No one organization has all the answers, but together we can deliver these changes. The theme of this conference is ramping up relevance, and this is how we in Clarivate intend to do it, by taking responsibility for the role that we can play. In response to the question posed on the conference website, what comes after open access, open peer review, and open science? I would say that it's an open mind and a broader view of our mission. If being an academic publisher was ever just about publications, then it certainly isn't today. If the business that I now manage was only about Web of Science or Journal Impact Factor, it certainly won't be so tomorrow. We're enablers of research that will mean something very different in the years to come than it did in the recent past. I believe that Clarivate, with its neutral position across all journal publishers and subject areas, and with our strong instinct to put researchers first, is in a unique position to help take academic publishing and research to the next level. I've been in my new role for only a few weeks, so it's early days yet, and whilst I can't share with you every detailed plan at this stage, I have tried to give you a sense of direction where I see the challenges, opportunities, and where Clarivate will focus. I would, however, like to share with you an announcement in an informal way that I will make formally shortly, and that is that I am reestablishing ISI, the Institute for Scientific Information. ISI was initially founded in 1957, and it was the organization that shaped what was, at the time, the emerging field of bibliometrics and provided thought leadership in this space. ISI was known for its integrity, for its innovation, and for its collaboration with the research community. The reestablished ISI will not only lead in new metrics, but it will crucially be built on the deep and rich experience, understanding, and insights of its foundations of setting the standards in responsible metrics. As the mothership of responsible metrics, nothing else has the foundation to guide us forward in this way. The core metrics which are important now will not and should not lose their relevance, but rather be guiding stars as we create a usable dashboard going forward. In reestablishing ISI, we are neither trying to preserve our past nor break entirely from it. Instead, we will stay true to the founding principles while reinterpreting them for a very different world. In a sense, we're going back to the future. In closing, research is fundamentally a collaborative endeavor, and improving it will be too. To this end, we are working closely with researchers and intend to do more of this, because they're not just our users and customers, but in many cases, our collaborators and partners too. In the same spirit, I'm looking forward to continuing to work with many of you and your respective organizations, because no one can do this alone. As I take the helm of this business, I'm conscious of the responsibility that I have taken on. I'm also aware that as a former researcher and a former publisher, I bring my own unique perspective to the challenges and solutions. What I am certain of is that as we embark on this journey of discovery together, exploring new paths and pursuing the best ones with a sense of imagination and purpose that I hope will make both our forebears and our grandchildren proud. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Annette. So there's nothing to say anymore. There are certain speeches which are like a good piece of dark chocolate. You just indulge it. So thank you again, Annette. And I think we are all very proud that you came to APE in Berlin. And on behalf of Arnaud, I invite you to change the places and go to the Refugium. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation.